the science of running technology. And we're going to look at a couple different aspects of running tech and talk about how this interfaces with the work that we do both inside and outside of the running center and our running clinic. And kind of the goal here is to keep people on the track and on the road. So what's happened in the running world since our last running medicine webinar last month? Well, a lot's happened. And, first of all, as we all know, a number of our events have been kind of canceled, postponed. Initially, it was the summer. Now it's the fall. We're still trying to sort our way through what the future is going to look like in the short term. The medium to long term, I think, is going to look great, but the short term has been a real challenge. That we've seen organized mass participation events obviously are canceled, but we've seen an uptick in the number of people outside moving around. I just got back in from Central Park, and it's really crowded with people of all abilities and all levels, people that are walking, people that are jogging, people that are running. And as I know, Megan, who's clicking down from Ridgefield, Connecticut, and the running store up there knows, there's been an uptick in people coming in talking about running and running shoes, running as a sport, running as exercise. We've seen a lot in the face mask discussion, and we've talked about this as it's kind of become something that people did during activity. Then people are not doing it as much during outside activity, but they are if they're close. I just want to say that wherever you are watching us from, just if you're inside, wear the mask, period, and make sure everybody around you is wearing the mask, period. That's number one. This is a scary disease. We don't have a cure yet. We don't have a treatment yet. So the best thing we can do is make sure we're not breathing on each other. When we're outside, if we're in a close group, I think it's really important to do that as well. If you're, outside isolated, if you can, if it's no big deal, I think it's great to do it. But I think just having it and having it on hand becomes really important. Some of the trends we're seeing in running and runners is more people at every level involved in running. One of the things you're going to be getting if you're clicking into this webinar tonight is you're going to be getting tomorrow, especially, I think this is especially pertinent with tonight's topic. You're going to be getting our study. We're putting together a study with a bunch of different organizations on people's appetite for returning to racing. And I think it's going to be helpful because we're going to then be getting this information to basically eventually to people who are organizing races and running companies, et cetera. But we're looking at, this is an IRB approved study, looking at people's kind of feelings on returning to racing, what kinds of events they're going to be doing. And this whole thing will take you about 5 minutes, 8 minutes. You're going to be getting that tomorrow. So please just go ahead and fill it out. It's anonymous. You don't have to submit your name, email, anything. And we really appreciate the help in getting our numbers up to power that study so we can get it done. The role of exercise in COVID is something that we're all kind of looking at not only during this pandemic, but some of the effects afterwards. Our goal is to get everybody back to running as a big piece of what we're going to do. We're going to give you a survey tonight as we jump into our next part of the webinar. So please make sure to answer this survey as well. All right, so tonight's program, we're going to be looking at the technology of running. And we have really two parts of this discussion. Part number one is a chat with Dr. Yukiko Matsuzaki. Yukiko is an amazing physical therapist. She's a doctor of physical therapy at HSS, and she's involved in our running analysis program. And we're going to look at the ways we analyze runners' gait mechanics to try and keep them healthy. And then we're going to talk with Robert Fay from ASICS, who is involved in basically taking shoes from research to market and what goes into that whole process, how it works. What goes into making running shoes, how you should think about running shoes for yourself. I think it's a really interesting topic that we don't know enough about on all levels. So I think it's going to be interesting to look at. So let's talk about our typical patient presentation. Our typical patient presentation is basically a 46-year-old new runner. And we're seeing a lot of these folks now in the office and virtually, people who are getting aches and pains because they're doing something differently or doing more. Dr. Metzl, my knee hurts when I run. Should I stop running? Obviously, if you're my patient, the answer is no. But how are we going to keep you running healthily is really important to me. So, what are some of the questions? What's the role of running in your life? Maybe you blew out your knee playing soccer in college. Maybe you have some arthritis in your knee. Maybe you haven't done any strength training. Maybe, you have a family history of arthritis. Maybe you had knee surgery when you were younger. How can we fix your knees so they feel better? And that's a whole kind of process with, looking at knees. We'll do a whole webinar on knees in the next couple months. And then we think about how do we keep you on the road for prevention? That's everything from what's your training program like to what's your nutrition and your body what's your body, everything from what you're putting in to the shape of your body, to the strength in your body, to your BMI. All those things make a difference. Tonight, we're going to talk about the last two, your running form, your running technique, and your running shoes, and a little bit about your running strength. These are all things that we can do to help keep people on the road. So tonight's program is all about thinking about those issues. And as we do that, I'm going to throw up our first poll here. So I want everybody to go ahead and answer these questions on our poll as it pops up in front of you. And this is our running medicine poll, and we're going to run this for about just about 30 seconds here. So what pattern describes your running in the past 3 months? Are you running more? Are you running less? Or are you running the same? What describes your fitness level in the past 3 months? Is it the same? Is it better, or is it worse? And then finally, we're going to say, I can't wait to get back to running races, true or false. And so as everybody's voting, your votes are tallying here. Now this is a sanctioned vote, and we're getting almost everybody's voting. Keep going. I think my dad's on in Kansas City. Dad, you go ahead and vote too, and Mom, please vote as we go here. I think we're going to close the polls in 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. So polls are now closed, and so here are the answers. What describes your running patterns in the past 3 months? And so it looks like the running more is the most common answer. The running more is about half of you are running more, and then a quarter are running less, and a quarter are running about the same amount. That's interesting. That's about the same amount we've been seeing in the different work we've been looking at. What describes your fitness level in the past 3 months? Is it better? Is it worse? Or is it the same? And it looks like about half people are better, and a quarter are worse, and a quarter are about the same. And it looks like about 90% of you can't wait to get back to running races. And that's what our whole study is going to be about, which is all about getting people back to activity. So with that, I'm going to bring down Yukiko Matsuzaki. And Yukiko is a physical therapist at HSS, and she's involved in our running program. Yukiko, thank you so much for being here.
Thank you for having me, Dr. Metzl.
No problem. So first of all, why don't you talk a little bit about what you do at HSS and what our running analysis program is? Let's start with that.
Yeah, absolutely. So here at HSS, our running analysis program, we have runners of all ages, all abilities come through our program, whether you're injured or not. We go through this whole strength and flexibility testing. We look at footwear, we look at the whole body from head to toe, and then we do a video analysis. We do a gait analysis using this motion capture technology to look at all parts of your running gait cycle to figure out how we can improve your running, whether you're injured or not. So it's a great way to help runners of, again, all ability, whether you're a beginner runner or an elite runner, and then we get to help runners achieve all of their goals.
Yeah, no, it's important. And it's interesting because, I end up seeing a lot of people that get hurt, from running, but once we fix their injury, I think a big piece of that is figuring out why the injury happened in the first place. And I think that's where this program becomes so important. As it pertains to kind of what they're doing. Are they not strong enough? Are they having their form? Is that a problem? Or as we'll talk about with Robert in the run kind of shoes. And I think this program is helpful for getting some of those questions. Yukiko, you agree with that?
Yes, absolutely. Sorry.
Okay, good. That's okay. I was waiting for some affirmation. Yeah. All right. Absolutely. No problem. So here's what we're going to do. I'm going to throw this over to Yukiko. I'm going to put up just a couple slides that she had made about just kind of talking about that program. And again, I don't want to say that there are a number of different running analysis programs. People from all over the country on this webinar. If there's a program doing the same kind of thing where you are, that's awesome. I just think that this is interesting because as we kind of think about the future of technology and running, I think this is a piece where we're really seeing people expand into these areas. And I think it's exciting because I think it gives us more information, but I would say that there are many different ways to run. And if you're not having any problems running the way you are, either the kind of shoes you're wearing or the training you're doing or whatever, we're not here to tell you wear these shoes or do this, run this way. There are a bunch of different ways to do this, and there's not a one size fits all. So if it ain't broke, don't fix it. But if we see people with injuries, we start to think about what are some of the things we can fix. And that's where this, I think, program is real helpful. So Yukiko, I'm going to now get your slides up here. And we're going to throw over to your slides. And actually, hold on one second. And we'll get this going here. Sorry, we're just Yukiko's, we're having a little trouble here. Who's the common person that comes in to see you for this kind of thing? You can hear me, right? Even if
Yeah,
you can't see me.
totally. Yeah. So a typical presentation of a runner that comes into our running analysis program is someone who has been hurt many times in the past. They've been nursing this knee pain or this foot pain for on and off for 2 or 3 years. They've been running marathons in the meantime, still going out for a run. They've tried all kinds of orthotics. They've bought every shoe that they could find. Nothing is working. They've gotten injections. They've gotten x-rays. Everything looks good. They just can't figure out what to do. So finally they come to us and say, what can I do to make my knee pain better or my foot pain better? So this is where it's so cool to see, yes, the foot hurts or the knee hurts, but typically, it's not the knee that's the problem, it's the hip, or maybe it's the knee pain, but it's the foot that's really something that we need to fix. So it's kind of cool to see the whole body and see where we can fix. It's kind of like trying to, solve a little mystery or trying to figure out and putting all the different pieces of the puzzles together.
Absolutely. All right, hold on. I'm going to ask you another question as we go here. So are you guys seeing a different trend in the way people are coming in now that there are no kind of organized races?
Yeah, you know what? I think the recent runners that I've had in the running analysis program are people who are casual runners. So 3 to 5 miles, they just run because they want to stay fit. They're not necessarily racers, which is nice to, kind of see that people are just running for fitness, or they just run a mile before they work out or whatnot. And so that's also kind of nice to see the variation of people coming through. And that's just another thing that I wanted to make sure that I presented to everyone, that, there's really no limitation on age. We've seen runners from masters runners all the way to the adolescents, so 14, 15, 16-year-olds. We see the casual runners all the way to the marathon, ultra runners, even trail runners. And then whether you're a beginner or an elite runner, everyone is welcome.
All right, Yukiko, you're up there. Your slides are up. So basically, hit it.
Perfect. All right. So when a runner comes to our running analysis program, we start with this little chat, a clinical intake. So typically runners will fill this out beforehand, but it's basically going through all the running history, what your goals are, what's your training schedule is like, and what your shoes are. And then also a detailed history of your injuries. So we will sit down and talk more about that as well. And then the most important thing for me is always what each runner's goals are, whether it's just run pain-free for a mile, or it's make a big Boston qualifying time, or if it's just to stay injury-free. And I think that that's really kind of changes how I look at things.
Yeah, I mean, it's interesting because every runner is a snowflake, right? So you can all do the same thing, but the way they, what their goals are, what their body is, what their, from goals to history to age to athletics to, there's so many variables. There's not a one size fits all for anybody.
Yeah, absolutely. So when a runner comes to our clinic after the clinical intake, we'll go through the strength and flexibility testing. So we'll literally do a clinical examination from head to toe, all the way to the big toe, how much it bends. We look at how strong.
Why does that make a difference, how much the big toe bends?
Oh, because it has an influence on push off. So when you push off, you really need 90 degrees of big toe bending. And if your big toe does not bend, it could definitely put a strain on your lower back, or you may be compensating by using too much of your hamstrings or your glutes.
And if you had to kind of, as I see the far left here, strength and flexibility, if you had to grade the importance of these things, strength and flexibility, they're both important. Yeah. I always, and maybe it's because I'm biased because I love strength training, and I've seen it be so effective from patients in my practice, but I feel like flexibility is important, but I feel like strength is undervalued and flexibility may be overvalued. And I don't know if you feel the same. Do you feel like they carry equal weight, or is one more important than the other?
I don't know that if one is more important than the other. I think that you cannot properly strength train if you don't have the proper flexibility. So you don't need to be overly flexible, but you need to be flexible enough so that your joints can move. And sometimes that's what we'll see with a lot of runners, is that they're so tight that their joints are not able to move through the full range that it's meant to move. Right. So then you're not actually getting through that range. So then you can never really strength train at the very end of the range of motion.
Interesting. And what about kind of soft tissue flexibility, like people with tight hamstrings versus bony inflexibility, things like people with arthritic joints, like a big toe joint that may be arthritic, it doesn't have as much motion.
Yeah, absolutely. So for sure, the joint mobility will have limitations. As a physical therapist, I think that anything can be improved, even if it's the slightest bit. And so for me, I think that even if someone has a really arthritic joint, I think you can mobilize a little bit, which then we'll send to a physical therapist to sort of work on. But flexibility, so soft tissue tightness, can definitely be improved on your own. So that's definitely something we always teach to the runners, whether it's foam rolling, any kind of like Theragun or any, kind of soft tissue modalities is very helpful.
Yeah, definitely. Sorry, keep running on. So movement pattern, yep.
Totally. So after that, we'll do a movement assessment. So we look at how well you stand on your one leg. We will see how you do a squat, a single leg squat, a step down, plank test to see how your core is working, basically how you move. Then we do the running analysis, which is a 2D video analysis. We put it into a special software that can slow it down frame by frame, so we can see every point in the gait cycle. And we put all that information together with the shoe wear, and then in order to create a customized program that fits an individual runner's goals.
And what about, so looking at this, obviously people run very differently. So looking at this running mechanics piece, because if I go out for a run in Central Park like I just did, there are people who I feel like they're going to end up in my office and they never end up getting hurt. And there are people that are running perfectly with great mechanics and they get hurt all the time. So is there a commonality in the way people kind of make the same mistakes that end up in my office and your office, or is this just a piece of the puzzle?
I think it's a piece of the puzzle for sure. There is no one absolute perfect form. There are ideal forms, but the main thing that we look at is the side-to-side differences, right? So if your right knee is doing something different than the left knee, and then if your right knee is the one that's hurt, then maybe that's something that we need to look at, and so forth. So I think that's important to consider.
All right. Well, this is looking at some of the video.
This is an example of a screenshot of one view of the running gait cycle. So this is the exact point at which the foot strikes the ground. So the initial contact or the foot strike. So if you could see, this runner's foot strike pattern is a very aggressive heel strike, right? Heel strike sometimes has this like very bad rap. It's not very good. Everyone was into those like Vibram 5-finger shoes or barefoot running that makes you strike flat, but it's not so bad when it's a low angle. So the bottom of the sole of the shoe and then the treadmill angle needs to be very low. Okay, that's not so bad. But in this case, in this runner's case, it's a pretty high angle, right? Her toes are fairly pointed upwards. So that's not so great. And then let's take a look at where the foot is striking on the treadmill. So I dropped a red line through the ankle, and you can see that red line is very far from the center of her body, right? So ideally, that foot should really land underneath the knee so that the red line would come much closer to her body. This is basically called overstriding, and then overstriding with a very high aggressive heel strike and a very straight knee is a very common reason for injury, because it does increase that braking force. So in running, you want to go from point A to point B as fast as you can, right? Especially in a race. But if you're pointing your toes up and you're putting your foot straight out in front of you, you're increasing that braking impulse. So your body weight and your acceleration, or the speed that you're moving at, that force, that instant that the foot strikes the ground, comes right back at you, and it gets absorbed into your body. And where does it get absorbed is your bones, joints, and tendons when the knee is super straight and then the foot is super high.
Yeah, so this is a classic kind of thing where somebody may come in with like, we see them like runner's knee or a stress fracture in their hip or whatever, and we fix the injury, but this may be part of the reason why they're getting a problem, as well as this view here.
Absolutely. So this is the back view where we look at the core and the hip. So you can see that this runner, same runner, she lands on her right leg and the pelvis or her hip is relatively straight. It's about 4.1 degrees. Now, if you look at the left side, you can see that it's about 8 degrees, which is twice as much bigger, right? So this type of running can definitely, it signifies the core and hip weakness, and it can definitely contribute to injuries down the leg. And in females, it's been really shown to be related to tibial stress fractures.
You bet. And so this is one of the classic medical problems we see called WBS, right, Yukiko?
Yep.
This is weak butt syndromes. This is somebody that needs to do some more jump squats. This is somebody that needs more strength. And this is a kind of a classic thing. And again, same type of thing, injuries throughout the lower extremities related to, I tell my patients that dancing the salsa is great when it's time to dance the salsa, but when you're running, you want a nice stable pelvis.
Yep.
And you don't want as much wiggle. And this is somebody that has some wiggle because they're not strong enough.
Absolutely.
And lastly, what about this guy?
This is going, so if you look at this runner, you can see that his hips are pretty good, right? And then there's some space between the knees, which is exactly what we want. Now, if you look super far down to his foot, look how much his foot is collapsing inward. So this is typical pronation. Pronation is a normal human movement that is needed to absorb shock, but when it's too much, it can cause a lot of injury. So it can cause a lot of ankle pain on the inside of the ankle. It can be related to plantar fasciitis. It could also cause pain up the chain in the knee or the hip, right? So when I measured it in this special software, it's about 18 degrees. And ideally, we want 6 to 8 degrees. So that's far more than what we want to see.
So this may be somebody that gets Achilles tendonitis or any types of things.
Yes.
So just to finish up with Yukiko, and sorry, I know we got off to a slower start, but this is the information on our Sports and Performance Center. And when you get the follow-up email from this webinar, you can please feel free to shoot me a note if you're interested, and we're happy to connect you with anybody there. It's a great program, and I think it's been a great asset for helping us with our patients. Yukiko, thank you very much. And that was great information. Now, Yukiko, can you see where I am right now? We are in this PowerPoint, and you're going to see there's a Q&A box up here on the top.
Yes.
Now, good. So Yukiko, your job in the Q&A, right? See right here in Q&A where my little arrow is? So you're going to open that on your computer too, because you're going to be in charge of getting me the first correct answer. All right. So I need the first correct answer. And the way this is for the first pair of shoes after Helen Falk, who is now the last person to answer where she's answering us from. So here comes the first question, which is, who did this to us? Meaning, who invented this crazy thing? And where was he working? I need the full name of the person that invented this crazy activity, and where was he working? And that you're going to win a free pair of shoes from ASICS if you put the answer in the Q&A. We're waiting after Helen. Somebody give me the answer to this. It's got to be in the Q&A. And here we come. No, sorry, Tamar. Sorry, Robert, that's close. Tara Novi, Ms. Tara Novi. Congratulations, Tara Novi. You're going to email me tomorrow. You have won for the burpee. Royal Huddleston burpee, invented the burpee. Ms. Tara Novi has won Lord Burpee. Royal Huddleston burpee is credited with inventing the burpee. So congratulations, Tara Novi. And Yukiko, that was great information. Thank you so much. So what we're going to do, Yukiko, is we're going to hop now to Robert, and then I'm going to do a Q&A with both of you at the end. Does that sound good? Terrific information. Thanks. All right. So now it's a pleasure to bring down Robert Fay. Robert works with ASICS, and he helps develop the shoe wear. And just somebody who I've been to Japan and seen their facilities, so they have an enormous and long-standing history of 50 years plus, 75 years plus developing shoes, and they have walls of 50, 60 years of their different lines as they've perfected them. And Robert is kind of the liaison between the development side and the taking the shoes to market side. Robert, is that a correct way of describing what you do?
Yeah, absolutely. So I'm a footwear merchandiser, so help work with our product engine design team, development team, and then ultimately hand that off to running stores around the country and runners to experience new products and where innovation's going for the brand.
I tell my running patients that like who you marry, what kind of job you get, where you live. Those are all like important decisions, but probably the most important decision you're going to make is what kind of running shoe you're going to get. It's a hugely important decision for every runner. And so, Robert, I thought you might start by holding up a running shoe and just kind of walking us through the main pieces, because it's kind of confusing. And let's kind of talk through what are the main parts.
Yeah, so I've got here, if you can see it, one of our flagship models, the Gel Kayano. This is version 27. It's been evolving in our line since 1993. But from a basic component standpoint, the kind of most important or the core element of a shoe is the midsole, that big element of cushioning underfoot. And sometimes that's a single piece of foam. Other times, like in a shoe like this, you've got elements like gel to attenuate shock. You've got foam. You've got some structuring elements to help in terms of stability and overpronation that Yukiko talked about. Up top, you've got traditionally what's called the upper. Comes in a variety of materials, laces. I'm sure everybody knows that. You can have some elements in the rear foot, like a heel counter that helps hold, lock in, provide structure. And then last but not least, your outsole, which is what provides grip and some protection and durability as well.
Now, how do people know? And I think there's been, from when, ASICS first started, and if you want to read a great book on this whole topic, I think Shoe Dog is a great history of kind of the running shoe, evolution of the running shoe. And so an early running shoe technology, there was kind of one flat shoe. So we go from that to where we are now, where there's cushioned and flat and minimalist. And how do people make the best decision for themselves, Robert, of what kind of shoe they should be in? Is that something like Yukiko? Is that me? Is that you? Is it everybody together? What's the best way that you guys think about making that decision?
Yeah, I think a lot of the time it's, the more resources and education, the better. So I'd certainly start, connecting to guys like you, doctors in your area, learn from DPTs, get an understanding of what your gait looks like, where maybe some of those deficiencies lie. Certainly local run shops are a great resource, not just for ASICS, but across brands. They can help do kind of a scaled down version of what Yukiko walked through in terms of a gait analysis. And ASICS stores can do that as well. And then, certainly the internet is a great resource with the growth of social media platforms. Certainly make sure what you're learning from is validated and authenticated, but from the right sources there, you can learn a lot about the run experience and what footwear may be best for you. But I think trying on and comfort is kind of first and foremost the filter for every runner out there. If the ride's uncomfortable, it's not what you want to spend time and miles in. So education all around, and then experience.
And what about, we've seen some of these different trends I talked about, kind of the very cushy shoe. I mean, ASICS has been doing this for a long time. How talk us through the process of how you go R&D from the idea of making a shoe. I mean, you said you're making the Kayano since 1993, so that's a lot of Kayanos. This is now the 27th. How does that whole R&D process work? And I mean, it's fascinating.
Yeah, for us, we've been around since 1949, and certainly the shoes from 49 to today are incredibly different. And it all starts at our Institute of Sports Science in Kobe, Japan, this 5-story really kind of design and research hub where we've got DPTs, podiatrists, scientists of all kind of ilks, from materials to biomechanics, all working together to really evolve, learn about the human body and the experiences of not only running, but sport in general. And then how do we refine, tinker, and really improve upon and continue to kind of democratize the running experience and products for runners out there around the world.
Yeah, no, it's an amazing facility and it's an amazing place to kind of go see. And so what's the usual time course from something in Kobe, Japan, researching it? And what happens then? Walk us through that part.
Yeah, so I'd say your average shoe is between 18 and 24 months from kind of brief and concept to get to market. And a lot of the time that starts with a really simple idea about addressing a runner's issue that we find common talking to runners around the globe. So it starts there and goes first and foremost into biomechanics and the science behind the experience underfoot and how we help the runner. And then from there, it gets into a designer, more an artist's hands, where they kind of craft what can come to life and speak to the brand and what we're trying to bring to the runner. And from there, it's evolved through multiple sample rounds where we do tons of wear testing across these broad swaths of runners. We do tons of science-based feedback with internal and external groups to validate it. And then ultimately, we do a lot of consumer panels, honestly, around color and material and how the shoes come to life. And then it gets to the store shelves and onto the internet from there about 2 years later.
That's my interesting piece, is that I always wonder, and I'm sure you have this information, is what's the most common reason people buy a running shoe? I'm guessing is what it looks like more than what it feels like. I mean, how does aesthetics and function? You must have information on that.
Certainly in running, we have a saying internally that comfort is king. That's where it starts. Like, don't get me wrong, people buy for color or are motivated by story around a shoe, but getting in it, experiencing it, and realizing most people are going to log 300 to 500 miles or more on every running shoe they purchase. So it starts with really comfort underfoot and what can keep them healthy through those miles.
Now, the other thing, and we'll open it up some questions, but ASICS has been experimenting with different kind of different types of technology. Was wondering if you could so I saw the Kayano, which is now in the 27th edition. I know you've been walking through some of these different other, things like the Nova Blast. I was wondering if you can kind of walk through some of those different things and how those work differently.
Yeah, I'd love to. So Kayano, we talked about briefly at the top, that's our flagship stability shoe. So it goes back to that kind of idea of overpronation that Yukiko talked about, and not necessarily how do we control overpronation, but how do we provide runners a solution where the shoe is going to hold up and not enhance any of that motion. So ultimately reducing the risk of injury. So Kayano is kind of our flagship of the line on that stability side. And then on what we call the neutral side, those are shoes where people don't necessarily overpronate. They're more stable underfoot to begin with. And it's all about cushioning there for those neutral runners. So for us, we've got two shoes, the Nimbus. They're named after clouds. Nimbus being kind of that maximum cushion, super plush cloud. You've got our gel technology in the heel and the forefoot, this ultra plush foam underfoot. And then we also have another cloud shoe, the Cumulus, that's got similar tech, but is built to be a little lighter weight and is more kind of versatile overall. So our line architecture is really kind of built from the top and the maximum support and cushioning, and kind of cascade down on almost like a weight spectrum and versatility spectrum.
And are you committed to, if you're like a Kayano runner, does that mean you should only do Kayano? I mean, I was wondering about kind of switching between. What do you recommend in terms of wear the same shoe for 600 miles and then switch to the same thing again? Or do you recommend switching around? What do you think about that? And Yukiko, I'll ask you the same question, actually.
A lot of it,
Robert, you go first.
Yeah, a lot of it comes down to comfort and personal preference. So within our line, Kayano's at the top. If it's a stability shoe, there's a shoe that kind of sits right under it called the GT2000 that's been around almost just as long, has a lot of similar attributes, but some different geometries and shaping to it that really give it a different ride, different fit, different feel. So we always recommend, if you're going into a running store and you're looking to get a new pair of shoes, certainly you want to start with the next model from what you wore previously. So if you wore a Kayano 26, try on the Kayano 27. But also try on two other shoes in the line to get some different experiences on foot, get some people's opinions, and make sure you feel like you're in what's best for you from a comfort filter first and foremost.
Yukiko, wondering how you answer that question about same pair of shoes, 600 miles, and then switch it out, or do you recommend several different rotation? How do you answer that?
For myself personally, I like my one pair of shoes, which is the Brooks Pure Cadence, and I only like the model 7.
Okay,
so
fine.
I loved it, and then they change. They, every model they keep changing a little bit, and I didn't like the 8s, so I just kept buying the 7s, and now I just have a stock of my Pure Cadence.
You're a hoarder. And for patients, it's interesting because the discussions that I have with patients are, everything from people that just want to have one shoe and do everything in one shoe, to sometimes for some longer distance training, something like the Kayano, which is more of a stability, can absorb a lot of miles, and then switching over to something, a little bit lighter for a race. is something that some people do without racing as much now. I think we're changing that information because we want people just to be able to, it doesn't mean you shouldn't be running fast when, in challenging yourself. We'll do more, by the way, in the future around virtual racing, which I think is going to be a whole new subject, and we're not going to talk about tonight. But I think it's an interesting discussion point about how we recommend and what we recommend. And, different feet and, different people gravitate towards different brands, and different feet seem to feel better in different brands. And so I think it's, certainly we have like ASICS runners and different brands runners, and that's fine. Obviously, we just want you out there moving. We don't care necessarily what you do with it. Just as long as you're out there moving, I think is the helpful information. All right, so we're going to now give away another pair of shoes, and then we're going to get to some audience question and answers. Robert, you ready to give away some shoes?
Absolutely.
Okay, good. So you know the drill. Everybody but Terranovi, who already won a pair of shoes tonight, can win a pair of shoes here. Terranovi, you cannot win a pair of shoes. So we're going to give away a pair of shoes, and get ready for the Q. I have to go down. Yukiko, you want to be the judge on this one?
Sure.
Okay. And then we'll answer some questions. So here we go. You can see the Q&A there. So here, on your marks, get set. Okay. On my Instagram account, the second photo in on the top, I have a picture with my dad. Where is it located, and what stadium is that? What's it called? Where's it located? City and state. I'm waiting right here for another pair of shoes. Robert is really excited to give you a pair of shoes. If you get the right answer, put it right in the Q&A. So I need baseball. What's the name of the baseball stadium? City and state. We still got Royal Burpee coming in from Helen. All right, that's not going to be happening here. Q on, put it in there. What's the baseball stadium? City and state. Robert is very close. Rick is very close. I've not got the right answer yet. Tim Decker has got the right city, but he's got the wrong state. I need the stadium. Nobody's put it all together yet. Stacy, I'm sorry, that's the wrong end of the state. Dinora Balthazar. Dinora Balthazar. Oh, Rob Roof, I'm sorry, my friend. You were very close, but Dinora Balthazar beat you out. Dinora Balthazar wins with Kauffman Stadium in Kansas City, Missouri, not Kansas City, Kansas. There are two states where I grew up. It's the same city, two states. Kauffman Stadium is on the Missouri side. And Dinora Balthazar, you're going to email me tomorrow when you get that email, and you have won yourself a pair of shoes. Robert, should we give away our last pair of shoes right now? What do you say?
Let's do it.
Okay, here comes our last pair of shoes. Everybody knows the drill here. Helen, sorry. Poor Helen. Helen thought the Orioles in Baltimore. That's a good guess, Helen, but sorry about that. Helen, I'm going to call out Helen Falk. I want you to win this, Helen. Here we go. Here's our last. Helen even wrote Phooey. P-H-O-O-E-Y, Phooey. I love it, Helen. I want you to win, Helen. Here we go. On your marks. Get set. Okay, what is that? What is that? What is that? Come on, type it in. Come on, Helen. What is that? Come on, Helen. Helen or somebody. We're going to give away our last pair of shoes. It's not a clown shoe, Helen. I'm sorry. Poor Helen. Robert, it's not a clown shoe, is it?
Close, but not quite.
Helen is all in for the clown shoe. I need an answer here. Come on, somebody give an answer to what is that? Somebody give me an answer. Somebody give me an answer. I'm waiting, trying to give away a pair of shoes.
I think people are answering in the chat.
No, it's got to be in the Q&A. It's got to be in the Q&A. Except for Helen, it can't be in the chat. Can't be in the chat. Has to be in the Q&A. Has to be in the Q&A. Track spikes. We have a right answer down there yet? I'm looking. I don't see it yet. Somebody win. You know what? We are not going to give away this pair of shoes because I don't think anybody's getting me the answer here. Poor Helen. Helen has written this answer like 15 times. All right, you know what? Forget it. We're just going to give this pair of shoes to Helen because she's written the wrong answer so many times. I feel so bad for her. She's just going to get the right answer. Helen, you get the pity pair of shoes. Congratulations. Robert, what is this?
That's the ASICS Marathon Tabby. It was one of the first marathon kind of racers in our line, inspired by traditional Japanese footwear with that kind of split toe.
That's right. So it's one of the first marathon shoes, and that's located in Kobe in the running museum there. And Helen, you're going to email me tomorrow, and you get the pity win, all right? Because clown shoe or whatever, and just writing the wrong answer so many times. We've got big love for you, Helen. So those are our 3 winners. So with that, let's get to some questions in our Q&A. And again, I want to make sure you write in your questions in the Q&A. Otherwise, we will not be able to answer them. And so just go right ahead and answer some questions. So Yukiko, listening to some of the comments about shoe development, how involved do you get in recommending particular brands of shoes in PT, or how do you do that?
Yeah, we definitely don't recommend a particular brand. And just like Robert said, I think it's the comfort. And so we will recommend the type of shoe, whether it's a neutral or stability or motion control. And those are the general directions we push the runners into. And then they'll go to a running shoe store. They'll try on 10 pairs of shoes that fits that category, and then they'll decide what they like. And so I'm very big on the comfort. It's just when you put your feet in the shoes, it feels good. I think that's a big sign that you fit, that shoe fits you.
Robert, got a question on how long running shoes should last for. When do you replace those in the Q&A?
Yeah, typically we rate our mileage kind of 300 to 500 is the range. Definitely varies in terms of terrain you're on, body type, and then also kind of level of shoe. Something like a Kayano, that's the maximum cushion and stability, will last a little bit longer than something like, we have a shoe coming out called the Meta Racer, definitely more geared toward marathon racing, much lighter, lower profile to the ground. That's going to be kind of on the lower end of the spectrum. But a typical rule of thumb, 300 to 500.
Now, Yukiko, we got a comment here from Lindsay, who says it's dangerous to stockpile too many shoes in your closet because you end up in boxes and I never use them. Do you have anything to say about that to Lindsay?
I totally agree. I guess sometimes, if you don't wear shoes and you just leave them in the closet, they can sort of wear in a weird way, right? If the room is really hot or cold or whatever. I do agree. So I don't have 10 pairs, but I do have a back, stock of 1 or 2.
All right, that's fair. Robert, Yolanda asked the question of how can we get better colors for women's shoes? She feels like the men have better colors than the women. Is that true?
I think it's all in the eye of the beholder. We work with pretty large consumer panels to kind of see where people think color's going and how to best apply it to our footwear. I'd say keep an eye out for the rest of our autumn winter 20 line as it comes out for some exciting kind of fun there. But color's certainly more art than science. So all in the eye of the beholder.
Interesting. How do you predict? Because it seems like those color trends change. And if you're telling me you're planning this stuff 2 years in advance, are you predicting what people are going to like for colors like a year and a half from now? How does that work?
It's certainly not an exact science. We're talking to runners all the time. We're looking at what's trending, starting all the way up on the runway at New York Fashion Week and Paris Fashion Week, and slowly watching that cascade down into the running and performance world. We also work with groups that specialize in color and the color evolution, such as Pantone. But again, it's an art. We just try to be as informed as possible and work through from a design direction standpoint seasonally, what we think will be kind of relevant and fun for the season.
Yukiko, Donna asked the question about shoe drop in running shoes. Can you talk a little bit about shoe drop, you and then Robert? What's that concept? In fact, let's do it first. Robert, why don't you start with drop? Hold us up an example of what the drop is, and then Yukiko, you can talk about what it is, and I'll talk about it too, how I use it in my practice.
Yeah, so looking at the gel cumulus, one of our neutral cushion shoes here, the drop is just the difference in the height of the heel versus the height of kind of the ball of the foot or the forefoot. So there's generally a range, there's 0 drop, super minimal flat level shoes, all the way up to 10, 12, even sometimes 15 millimeter drops or offsets between that height of the heel and forefoot. It can definitely affect biomechanics in different ways, address some deficiencies in a lot of cases. I'll let you guys dig deeper into the biomechanics side of it, though.
Sure. Yukiko, talk to us about a drop and how you recommend drop. And what's the range, Rob, before you get to Yukiko, what's the range in drop in shoes from what to what?
In our line, it's anywhere from 0 up to 13 millimeters.
So 0 meaning the heel and the foot are the same, or it's totally flat?
Yeah, exactly level. Almost
Yeah.
like you're just standing on almost barefoot on the ground, and then all the way up to 13 millimeter offset with a decent elevation to the heel.
Okay. So Yukiko, how do you talk to people about drop, and what's the role of that?
Yeah, I think the biggest thing is when people go from a higher drop, so like a 13 millimeters, to a 0 all at once because they just like the color, or they thought they've heard that the shoe is really nice or whatever. That's when people get injured the most. So I think like when we look at people run, the higher drop is, people tend to heel strike. When you go back down to a 0, then you want to try to midfoot strike. But if you're still heel striking, that can definitely cause some injuries. So I think it's important to make sure that you don't like switch from a very aggressive higher heel to like a very minimalist shoe all at once.
Yeah, I think I think one of the things that I talk about in my practice a lot is getting people to think about quickening their cadence, shortening their stride to limit that kind of overstriding you showed in that picture. And I think the drop is a piece of that. Certainly, if you have a bigger drop in the back, you tend to strike the heel a little sooner. And the lesser drop shoes have promoted more of a midfoot, forefoot gait pattern, which naturally, it's chicken or an egg that you have a shorter gait, you have a shorter stride, so you hit the forefoot or midfoot sooner. Not every runner can tolerate that. So what we like to think about, at least from my point of view, is I like to basically try and maximize the benefits of the minimalist shoe without necessarily putting everybody in a minimalist shoe. Meaning getting people to shorten up that stride mechanic, whether or not they're in a shoe that's built that way, I think is even secondary. I guess the take home is you don't have to be in a minimalist shoe to get the benefits of running with a minimalist style. I don't know if that's something you kind of think about, Yukiko, as well.
Yeah, I definitely agree. I think that what people think is that the shoe will do something for them, but it's not always, the case. You can wear fancy shoes, but it's still you who's running. And so like, if you don't change some other things, like if you go from a bigger drop to a 0 drop and you don't shorten, increase your cadence or shorten your stride, then you're, at a higher risk for injuries for different reasons. And so I think that it's important to like make sure that shoe is only a small piece of the puzzle, in the overall running.
So Yukiko, I like that. We're going to coin that for you. You're still you. I like that. We're going to keep that. Rob, I'm sorry. So Rob, our friend Rob out in Indiana, I believe, is where Rob is, talks about the shelf life of shoes you keep in the closet. So if you do the Imelda Marcos Yukiko method of hoarding shoes, she's now a shoe hoarder, whether she is or not. What's the shelf life of these things in the closet? Rob wants to know.
Yeah, I think if you're in, a temperature-controlled environment, you're good for two years probably. I'd say safely. Anything longer than that, I mean, that's just a long time sitting in the box. Similar, you wouldn't want to wear a garment that sits in the closet for 3 years. But I think, as long as it's in the right conditions, you're okay with a decent shelf life. That's
good. That's all good information. And Yukiko, we got some questions about walkers and people walking versus people running. And do you do recommendations? In my office, I do actually the same type of thing. That I figure out what kind of shoe I think is the best for them, and I will send them online or in person to get that shoe, be they a runner or a walker. I don't differentiate between the two. I don't know if you do anything differently.
Yeah, I don't. I do pretty much the same thing as well. Yeah.
I think that's all helpful. Well, listen, these are some great questions. It's a great topic. We have a million more questions. I try and get through as many of those as we could. But we're already, I thought we'd do this for 45 minutes. We're already at 55 minutes. I guess we're just going to finish with some closing thoughts. And so we will start, Robert, you get the first closing thought, and then Yukiko the second, just on kind of what trends you're seeing in the running world, any kind of message for the runners out there, particularly around kind of the cancellation of a bunch of different events and what kind of trends you're seeing?
Yeah, I think, everybody's facing a tough time globally, but it's been encouraging. Even with the results of your poll, we are seeing people running more overwhelmingly, both participation increase and people who have been runners running more miles and just falling in love with the sport again. I think our brand is rooted, its founding philosophy, and our name is an acronym that means sound mind and a sound body. And now that's more relevant than ever. So I just recommend everybody, whether it's a run tonight or tomorrow, to think about that and be inspired, and we can work through this collectively.
Terrific. Yukiko, what do you have to say to the world?
For running for me, it's definitely a lifestyle. It's a way to have running friends. My running friends are different from my non-running friends. I take the time to run, to think about, my life, my work, my whatever it is that I am dealing with. And so it's like definitely a big part of my life. And I think that's a big part of everybody else's life here on this webinar. And so I really hope that everyone continues to run. And if you run into an injury, or if you're not injured and you want to increase your performance, definitely come visit us, reach out to us and schedule a running analysis. We'd love to have you.
And I would just say that, it's been such a pleasure to put these programs together and over the past number of months. And we started right in March and we've been going all the way through. As you notice, we've spaced these out quite a bit. So, we're doing something once a month, once every 6 weeks, something like that around different topics, both our running and then our wellness, and then some in-person events. I think the immediate shock of the whole situation really made me want to try and connect community. And I think people are getting more comfortable where they are. But it certainly, as the weather gets colder up here, we'll start thinking about doing some more educational things as well. But, I think the community of people out is just tonight in Central Park, just people out there trying to move and be healthy is just incredible. And with all the gyms shut down, your own body and body weight and body strength are all things that are so important, as well as, the great sport of running. So Yukiko and Robert, thank you so much for being part of this. And everybody, thank you so much for watching. We had a really nice big crowd tonight, and we look forward to seeing you on the road. And please, when you get the questionnaire, fill out your questionnaire for us. You'll get it tomorrow. And the 3 winners, please make sure you write me tomorrow as well. All right. Congratulations, everybody. And thank you so much. And thanks for participating. Bye-bye.